Hello and welcome to the webinar about Layouts version 09. My name is Ivo, and this webinar is actually replayed. The original one was, of course, not recorded as we usually do by accident. So I'm now replaying the part where I show the demo of the layouts, etc. Regarding the questions which were later asked during the webinar, most of them were more about layouts in general and not about the topic, this particular topic that I'm speaking at this webinar. So let's continue with the topic. So as usual, I introduce myself at the beginning of every webinar. So I'm the co-founder of Netgen. It's a web agency in Zagreb, Croatia. We're roughly 20 employees. We do a lot of website building for 15 years. Using Easy Publish since 2004, since Symfony since 2013. And in the last 2 years, we are working on layouts. And we also work with clients and partners across European Union. So just quickly to refresh our memories about Netgen Layouts. It's a Symfony full stack application. It's tightly coupled with any other Symfony full stack application. We're already doing this with Easy platform. We have a proof of concept with Cilius, and we also have a proof of concept with Contentful, headless CMS, as a loosely coupled integration. If you want to know more about Netgen Layouts in general, I suggest you find the webinar from July this year, and where in that webinar I'm more into details about Netgen Layouts. This topic is about Layouts version 09. But before that, I also want to emphasize one important thing, which we will communicate more in the near future, is that Layouts is already being used by other agencies. And during October, we have at least 3 other agencies going live with their first implementation of websites using Layouts. We'll hopefully have soon some showcases and sharing their experience with Layouts. Also during October, we introduced or we tagged the 09 version, which introduces a lot of smaller improvements and features, but I will talk mainly about 2 big ones. So the first one is about translation of layouts. This was quite necessary because we have many or almost all of our projects are multilingual. We have, it might be just 2 languages, it might be 25 languages, it doesn't matter. We were in need of a solution that we don't do a lot of different layouts just because we have different languages. So for example, if we have a layout that is almost the same on all languages, it's just that titles and labels and some text is different, and then we would, so far we would need to duplicate it and map it to a specific language URL. This was possible, of course, but it was not very good experience. It was okay for sites with 2 languages, but as soon as if you go to 25 languages, then it just doesn't make sense to have 25 layouts just because of a few different labels. That's why we needed to implement the translation of layouts. I will show it later. And the other important feature is a block plugin. And a block plugin is a way to change how a existing block implementation works. So in layouts, we have many generic blocks, and there is also custom blocks being built for projects. So block plugins are very neat in a situation where you need a different, or you need a block which is very similar to what an existing block behaves, or how it looks and how it behaves. But you just need to change a little thing. So today you would need to more or less copy the whole block code and templates, etc. With a block plugin, this thing gets much simpler. You just create a block plugin and configure it so that it changes how the existing block behaves. I will also explain it a bit more later. So now I want to share or do a demo of those two features. Let me share my screen. Okay, so now we are again back to our demo site, which we showcased in the webinar, the first one. So as you can see here, we have two different site accesses, which is implemented in Easy platform, English and Croatian. And if I change it to Croatian, you will see that this title here changed. So this means news in Croatian. So let's look at how it looks on the backend of the layout. So if I log in to the administration interface, and if I go to the layout section, and if I find the home layout, open it. So what I will now see is the conceptual view of the front page. So first thing you notice is that we have a label of the language that is being shown at the moment, and this is only the main one. So whatever you do so far with layouts, you are doing it with the main language, and it's stated which language is main for this layout. In our case, it's English. And you see the title block, which has a latest news text. So the idea with the translation is that we don't do the translation directly in the block manager. We have a special translation module. So if I click on a translation module, I will now see the blocks in the language I select here. So in this case, it's still the main language. If I switch it to Croatian language, I will see the blocks with the Croatian content. In this case, it means Croatian news. I will want to change it to latest news. So why is this important that we have a different module for this translation? So as we see it, the translation module is important to change everything which makes sense to change in a language sense of in the language point of view. So whatever text you have on the blocks, you can change them, as well as parameters that are somehow related to content itself. So in this case, I can change the title block. For example, this grid block is not translatable at the moment. Also, what is important is that not all parameters are translatable here. So parameters that are more like design oriented, like CSS class, CSS ID, we made them not translatable by default. And some parameters like what heading level, this is related to content somehow, are translatable by default. So what is very important to note is that some things are by default, but you can change the behavior. So let me explain. All blocks are actually translatable if you enable the translation. So in this case, what I can do is change the translation option for this block. And if I set this, then I will be able to change this content, this title. So this goes for every block. So every block can be enabled to be translatable. Why is this not by default? Many reasons. The point is that you should only enable those that are actually translatable. So for example, this grid block here, you don't have anything to change there in terms of language. It is showing content from the Easy Publish, so it doesn't have any text by itself, so you don't need to enable it to translate because it will be the same for every language. This goes for the block. If we talk about block items which are coming from Easy Platform, there will be if there is a version of that content in the language that is being shown, that language will be used. So in this case, we see the English block items. On the front side, on the creation page, if there is a translated content for these blog posts, they will be used. If not, it will show the main language. So when I'm talking about translatability, I'm talking about the block parameters, not the block items. Block items are coming from the content repository like Easy Platform, which takes care of translation of that content. So, so again, by default, when you install layouts, only the blocks that are directly translatable are title and text blocks and those blocks that hold some content in the block itself. Those are by default translatable. The rest are not translatable, but for every block you can enable it if you need it. Regarding parameters, it's a bit different for parameters. So for parameters, all parameters are by default translatable in the code. They're all translatable except those that we think that are related somehow to the visual appearance. So, for example, the view types and CSS class and CSS ID. This is something that is really related to design. So we decided to disable the translation in the code. Although, if you need even those parameters to be translatable, you can do it in the code. So whether a parameter is translatable or not, it is you decide in the code. One important note is that if you upgrade from the last version of layouts to the 0.9 version, you need to, let's say, migrate your layouts from a generic or from a system with no languages to a system which has languages configured. So you need to choose what is the main language for all the layouts when you upgrade. So this is one thing. And the other thing is that all blocks are non-translatable at that moment. So if you need to when you're upgrading, you need to go and choose which blocks you want to translate. And if you go back from the translation mode and you do the publish layout, and if we go back, you will see that our news in creation is now latest news. One more thing, if you create a new layout in this version, you need to choose the main translation for this new layout. So you can have for different layouts, different main languages or main translations if you need that. This list is something that is fetched from the installation, in this case, Easy Platform installation itself, so it will show only the languages that the system can handle. So this was a demo about translations. Let's look at, let's mention the block plugins. So the block plugins is, like I said, relatively simple stuff. It's more for developers. Just want to show what I'm talking about. So if, for example, you need to implement a grid, a very similar grid to this, but it's a bit different. This is the grid block is actually a generic one, which comes with the system. So for example, you can imagine that you would like to have a title for each grid. So before 0.9 version, you would basically need to create a completely new block definition, create a new kind of custom grid and add this parameter. Now with the block plugins, it is possible to create this block plugin and add it to this grid, and your block, your parameter would, a new added parameter would show up here in either content or design tab. You can also change the how the current block is behaving in the code itself. You can also remove certain parameters, like if you don't need like this parameter number of columns, you can remove it via block plugin. Just to have an example of these block plugins in the code, what we did is we re-implemented the CSS class and CSS ID and wrapping container parameters to be as common block plugins, and they're applied to every block. So these are the block plugins, basically something that should save a lot of coding for next projects. Okay, so this was about block plugins. Of course, if you have any questions, you can ask the questions in the comment section of our blog posts or on the YouTube. Just to wrap up the presentation. Let's go back to the presentation. Just a second. Okay. So what about version 0.10? Just quickly, what we are cooking in our kitchen. One thing is very much needed in many projects is a page collections. This means that you will be able to implement Ajax pagings and load mores and similar stuff much easier. This change or this feature does bring a breaking change in the way how offset and limit works. Currently, the offset and limit were parameters of the query, where you define how you fetch the content into the collection. For this to work, we needed to bring them from the query to the collection itself. So the offset and limit will be parameters of the collection. And what we will do is we will do a migration script that should be able to transfer those existing offset and limits data from query to collection. And there, if you have some custom queries, you will probably need to do some code changes there. The next thing is very important one, export and import of layouts. This feature is also very much needed as soon as you have different instances of your system. So for example, a development and a testing, or pre-production or staging or a live instance. If you are creating layouts on one instance, you want to transfer them to another. We made a simple feature that is currently in review. It's about selecting the layouts you want to export and doing the export into JSON file. And then what you can do with that JSON file is go to another instance and then select an import, and new layouts will be created based on that JSON. Currently, we are not yet implementing syncing mechanisms. So when you import, you do create new layouts. And then you will probably need to update your mappings as well if you want to use those updated layouts. But at this point, we don't want to take everything at first. We first want to make sure that the basic stuff works, that the export and import works, and then in the future versions we would probably add the capability of updating layouts while importing, which is a bit more risky to do anyway. So this feature is much less risky. And what we also cooking is Easy Publish specific. So we took the standard Easy Publish query, which we built for layouts, and added, or we created a new one, which also has new parameters with easy tags, so that you can filter your content with easy tags. There are two ways which you can even combine. You can either manually select tags you want to filter the content with, or you can specify which tags fields will be used from the context page, and then take those tags and filter the content with those tags. And like I said, you can combine those two ways. And this is something specific to Easy Publish, but it's something that can also be used for as a example for some other custom query implementations. This is maybe not needed for every project, but we use it a lot. We use easy tags a lot for many projects, and especially on projects where the linking between content and relation between content is implemented with tags. This kind of query really gets things much easier. So there will be probably even more features with 0.10, and the release date is unknown. Of course, we will release when ready, but we at this point want to iterate as fast as possible. So this will end up in the 0.10 for sure, with possibly a few more things. We will see. We will let you know when we have that information. And that was it. Thank you for listening this webinar. Although it was replayed, I hope it will be interesting still. Thank you and goodbye.